Hey guys, it's Miss Clark. I wanted to do the next reading lesson, and this is chapter 17 and 18, and this is June 1st, 2020. So let's go ahead and get started. By the way, this is Sideways Stories from Wayside School. All right, so chapter 17, John. Number 1, John can only read words that are blank. Number 2, how does Mrs. Jules help John read the blackboard? Number 3, when John falls, he can read the blackboard. What does he think happened? And number 4, why do you think John is looking in the wrong spot for the candy? All right, so let's get started. Also, don't forget to do your character card. All right, chapter 17, John. John had light brown hair and a round head. He was Joe's best friend. John was one of the smartest boys in Mrs. Jules' class, but he had one problem. He could only read words written upside down. But nobody ever wrote anything upside down. But it was only a little problem. John was still in the high reading group. He just turned his book upside down. It was easier for John to turn his book upside down than to learn to read correctly. But the easiest way isn't always the best way. Miss Jules said, "John, you can't go on reading like this. You can't spend the rest of your life turning your books upside down." "Why not?" asked John. "Because I said so," said Mrs. Jules. "Besides, what happens when I write something on the blackboard? You can't turn the blackboard upside down." "No, I guess you're right," said John. "I know I'm right," said Mrs. Jules. "You are going to have to learn to stand on your head." John couldn't stand on his head. He had given up trying. You would have too, if you had fallen over as many times as he had. Joe was John's best friend. He could stand on John's head. Every time John fell over, Joe stood on his head. After all, what are best friends for? "My head is too round, Miss Jules. I can't stand on it," said John. "Of course you can, John," said Mrs. Jules. "If Joe can stand on your head, so can you." "It's easy, John," said Joe. "I can't," John repeated. "I always fall over." "Nonsense," said Mrs. Jules. "All you have to do is find your center of balance. Now, up you go." John put his round head on the floor and swung his legs up. He fell right over. Then Joe stood on John's head. "See, John, it's easy. Nothing to it," Joe said. "We'll help you, John," said Mrs. Jules. "Joe, get off John's head and let me get the pillow from under my desk. Nancy, Calvin, come here and give us a hand." So Mrs. Jules took the pillow from Joe and set it on the floor. "All right, John, we'll surround you," she said. "We won't let you fall." John put his head on the pillow and swung his legs up. He started to fall one way, but Nancy pushed him back. Then he started to fall another way, but Calvin straightened him out. John kept falling a little bit this way and that way until at last he found his center of balance. "Hey, look at me," said John. "I'm up, I'm really up. I'm standing on my head. I found my center of balance. It's beautiful. I can read the blackboard. Hey, Calvin, bring me a book, and you don't have to turn it upside down. Hey, bam." While Calvin went to get the book, John fell flat on his face. "You better stay off my head, Joe," he warned. "Are you all right, John?" asked Mrs. Jules. "Yes, I think so. I feel a little funny. Hey, I can still read the blackboard, and I'm not upside down. I can read right side up now. When I fell, I must have flipped my brain or something." "This is wonderful, John," said Miss Jules. "Here, put the pillow back under my desk, and as a reward you may have a Tootsie Roll Pop. They're in the coffee can on top of my desk." John placed the pillow on top of her desk. Then he looked under the desk, but he couldn't find the Tootsie Roll Pops anywhere. All right, so here are the questions. John can only read words that are blank. Well, they're upside down. Number 2, how does Mrs. Jules help John read the blackboard? Well, she tries to get him to stand on his head. Number 3, when John falls, he can read the blackboard. What does he think happened? Well, according to the story, it said that he thinks his brain flipped. And then number 4, why do you think John is looking in the wrong spot for the candy? Well, maybe he doesn't understand directions now because he's all mixed up. All right, so there you go. Chapter 18, Leslie. Number 1, what is Leslie's problem? Number 2, Lewis offers Leslie blank. And then number 3, why does he change the deal? Chapter 18, Leslie. Leslie had 5 fingers on each hand and 5 toes on each foot. For each hand, she had an arm, and for each foot, she had a leg. She was a very lucky girl, and she had 2 lovely long brown pigtails that reached all the way down to her waist. When Mrs. Jules asked a question, Leslie could raise one of her hands. When Leslie was adding, she could count on her fingers. When Paul pulled one of her pigtails, she could kick him with one foot while standing on the other. But Leslie had one problem. She didn't know what to do with her toes. She had 10 adorable little toes and nothing to do with them. As far as she could tell, they served no useful purpose. Suck her toes. That's what I do, said Sherry. But Leslie's foot wouldn't reach her mouth. Well, that's all toes are good for, said Sherry. She put her foot in her mouth and went to sleep. No, thought Leslie, that must be good for something. They just have to be. During recess, she asked Dana, Dana, what do you do with your toes? I scratch the back of my legs, said Dana. First, I scratch my left leg with my right foot. Then I scratch my right leg with my left foot. But my legs don't itch, said Leslie. That's good, said Dana. In that case, you can scratch my legs. With your help, I can scratch both legs at the same time. No, never mind, said Leslie. She walked up behind Louis, the art teacher, and hopped on his shoulders. Louis, said Leslie, I don't know what to do with my toes. Louis tugged her foot. Yeah, that is a serious problem, he said, but I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take them off your hands for you, or rather, your feet. Just cut them off and give them to me. What? Asked Leslie. You don't want them, so I'll take them, said Louis. You won't have to worry about them ever again. No, said Leslie. I'll give them to Miss Mush, said Louis. She can make little hot dogs out of them. Miss Mush was the lunch teacher. No, I'm not going to give my toes away, said Leslie. All right, said Louis. I'll give you a nickel apiece for them. No, you can't have them, said Leslie. Why not? Louis asked. They're no good to you anyhow, and think of all you can buy for 50 cents. The bell rang. I'll think it over, said Leslie. She ran back to class. Miss Jules, said Leslie, I don't see any reason for keeping my toes. Oh, Leslie, I'm sure there are lots of good reasons, said Miss Jules. Well, I can't think of any. My legs don't itch, and I can't get my foot in my mouth. Louis offered me a nickel apiece for them, and it seems to me like a good deal, but I wanted to check with you first. I think Louis was pulling your leg, said Miss Jules. No, said Leslie. He was pulling my toes. What would he want with your toes? Asked Miss Jules. I don't know, said Leslie, but if he's willing to give me 5 cents apiece for them, then I'm going to take him up on it. That's 50 cents. At lunch, Leslie walked up to Louis. Okay, Louis, she said, you can have my toes for a nickel apiece. That will be 50 cents. Not so fast, said Louis. Let me look at them first. Leslie took off her shoes. Yes, said Louis. The big ones are good, and the ones next to them, but the most I'll give you for the rest of your toes is 3 cents each. Leslie was furious. 3 cents each? You told me 5 at recess. I'll give you 5 cents for the big ones, but just look at that scrawny little runt of a toe on the end there. You're lucky to be getting even 3 cents for it. I think you're getting a darn good deal. I happen to like that toe, said Leslie. Fine then, said Louis. Keep it. I'll just take the 2 big toes, and we'll call it square. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a dime. Nothing doing, said Leslie. These toes are sold as a set. It's either all 10 for 50 cents or no deal. What am I going to do with just 8 toes? Then forget it, said Louis. I'm not going to give you a nickel for those scrawny little end toes. Fine, said Leslie. No deal. My toes will still be here if you change your mind. She turned and walked toward the hopscotch area. Wait a second, Louis called. I'll give you $1 each for your pigtails. Leslie turned around and looked at him with fiery eyes. Cut my hair? She exclaimed. Are you crazy? That's funny. All right, and that was chapter 18, which was about Leslie. And the question was, what is Leslie's problem? Well, she didn't know what toes were good for. So number 2, it says Louis offers Leslie 50 cents for her toes. And then number 3, why does he change the deal? He says because her other toes are too small. All right, so also don't forget to do the character card for Leslie. And that's all. So I will see you guys later. Bye.